Hello everyone and welcome back to Game Week 3 of the 2025-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership, where you join myself, Ryan Sipple, alongside Charlie McClellan for a potentially season-defining clash between Aspire and Leeds. Let's go through the squads quickly before we bring you the action live. Aspire, coached by Bobby Williams and John Balding, have Sally McNeil, Dan McClellan, John Balding, Jordan Williams, Rich George, Tom Kelly and John Dixon. And for Leeds, the informed side in the division, they have Jack Maxwell, Ethan Fisher, Lewis Harris, Dan Rigby, Dylan Kelsall and Summer Rice. Their coaches, Russ Rigby and Warren Kelsall. If we bring up the live league table, you can see what a potential 3 points does for first and second. It's simple. Win and go top of the table for Aspire. Pretty compelling viewing. No, Charlie?
I mean, this is about as big as they get in Game Week 3. Probably one of the most anticipated games of the season. We've had people talking to us about it all weekend. Feels like whenever you've watched one of these two sides, you're thinking, right, what have they got here? But also, how are they looking ahead of this big game? It is going to be a fantastic clash. It's one of the best stylistic matches I think we've ever seen in the National League.
I think the thing that sticks out to me about this standings is firstly how good Greenbank have been across Game Week 3, but also the fact that Teesside have 2 games in hand, or certainly will have 2 games in hand over Leeds and Aspire. If they win both of those, they would go on to 34 points. So they can still upset the party, but it will not be in Game Week 3 because they have only 1 game remaining.
It's a tough one too.
Yeah, massive one against West Bromwich Albion. I think next up on court A. But let's clear those graphics. Before I do, actually, let's show you the top goal scorer charts, because Dan Rigby made up some really good ground in the last game and across the weekend as a whole for that matter, whereby he is now just 1 behind both Mitch Tinkler and Dan McClellan on 14 apiece. I don't necessarily have the graphic for it, but Dan Rigby is also one off top assist provider with 11, 1 behind Tyler Reeve with 12.
The thing you can say about this graphic, though, is that all of that top 10 actually, really, on there, none of them care. Literally none of them care about those standings. It's all about that league table that you showed before. It's all about their teams. And I'm sure they will take a goal today, whichever way it comes. Own goal, divine intervention. They need to win this game, and yeah, they don't care who provides it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We've had a little bit of disagreement as to which way we think this game will go. You're pretty sure of it being a stalemate, a 0-0, or certainly put a lot of stock in that as a potential result. I see this being fairly high scoring. Probably will emulate the earlier game of Leeds Teesside in Game Week 2, where it was so fiery and frantic in the first half. We saw 2-3 goals, and then it just settled slightly. But something across Leeds' weekend is how quickly they have begun games. They immediately attack you. Can they replicate? John Balding in the centre. Paul Yates is our central referee, complemented by Ian Harley and Steve Crump. By all means, get your predictions into the YouTube chat. Paul Yates gets the thumbs up from the goalkeepers and officially gets things underway between Aspire and Leeds. To go through the squads as they start: Tom Kelly, John Balding, Dan McClellan, John Dixon, the familiar four for Aspire, likewise with Leeds. The starting lineup we have come to expect: Ethan Fisher, Lewis Harris, Dan Rigby and Dylan Kelsall. Dylan Kelsall, one to watch in this one. He has been on another level in Game Week 3 will no doubt be a consideration for Swizzle's standout player of the weekend, but I think we'll see this fixture influence a lot of people's decision making.
Massively. I mean, it's all well and good performing when you're, 1-2-0 up in games against sides lower in the table, but these are the games that define what players are known for.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we assess their opposition in game week 3, they've played GBG Knights, Villa Rockets and Middlesbrough, and with all due respect to those teams, none of those are even remotely in contention for the title. So this is when it matters. Already we're seeing that pace and that fiery nature as Dan McClellan just clips Lewis Harris into Ethan Fisher, and this is something we haven't seen so far this weekend. I think I've watched all of Leeds' games. No one has managed to test them defensively, which maybe there's some question marks. You just don't know because they're so front foot, they're so attacking, and they have the lion's share of possession in 90% of their games.
Yeah, Aspire really sticking it on them in the early moments. That's what they'll want. The best way to counter a fast start from Leeds is to, well, have a fast start yourself.
We've got a lot of predictions for Leeds in the comments section, and I can understand why, based on the form they're bringing into this. As Dan Rigby into his 180 tests Tom Kelly early on. It's good for Tom Kelly to just get that bit of contact and a really unfortunate ricochet. I do not know how John Balding prevented that from going over the line, but he's going to try and settle now. Incredible reactions from the Aspire captain.
Yeah, I do not know. That looks destined for a goal, a proper heart-in-mouth moment for Aspire. That just looked like it had found its way in. Such a clinical move from Leeds. Tom Kelly caught in somewhat no man's land there.
I was just going to go on to say that it's good for Tom Kelly to get that touch and for it to be a positive contribution to begin with, but the follow-up effort very nearly saw Leeds go 1-0 up. Good work from Dan Rigby as John Balding and John Dixon just trying to combine on this left-hand wing. Dixon across the box, off the back wheel of Ethan Fisher. Dixon, once again, doesn't have the accuracy, the pace to bypass the defensive duo of Leeds. And as mentioned, I've never really referenced Leeds in a defensive context all weekend. Contact there, I'm not quite sure who it's between.
Well, is that 3 in the box? I think so.
That is a very rare lapse in concentration and does present Aspire with a very good opportunity to test them even further. John Balding to take the initial ball into Dan McClellan, a miss hit, but it almost favours Dan McClellan as it rolls from one side to the other, but John Dixon was trapped there with the ball and his number 7 teammate coming over to the left. A little bit disappointing. You've got to be more clinical in those instances.
Yeah, I think John Balding was really frustrated with himself there. Very uncharacteristic error from him.
Appeals from Lewis Harris, heard by Ian Harley. So a kick in. Very stop-start in the opening 5 minutes. But Aspire have condensed them back into their own half. Dan McClellan this time to take. Probably looking for John Dixon because John Balding being hugged by Dan Rigby. Goes to the captain. The secondary effort doesn't fall favourably to John Dixon. Out for a Leeds ball.
Yeah, Spire with a couple of set-piece opportunities around the box. Trying to be creative. They know that the tradition of tried and tested methods will not harm Leeds in any way.
Dylan Kelsall trying to get them on the front foot with his battling with his international teammate. When you consider Ethan Fisher, Dylan Kelsall, John Bolden and Dan McClellan, that's a very good England team right there. And a classification compliant one as well. Wouldn't surprise me if that's a lineup that Adam McAvoy opted for in Argentina, so they know each other very well.
Yeah, they're very knowledgeable of each other.
Lewis Harris has Dan Rigby in support, but John Bolden is waiting to pounce. Tom Kelly has to be assured of his clearance. Just slightly blindsides Dan McClellan, who breaks away. Appeals for Dan McClellan to temper his aggression slightly.
Really do not want to see early bookings in this game. I think it's really important that the referee plays a very high sort of toleration for contact, otherwise this could get messy.
Yeah, we saw tempers flare in Leeds' earlier game against Middlesbrough. Ethan Fisher receiving yellow in that one, and observed the whole second half from the sideline because they didn't want to risk him being potentially suspended. And how many times, Charlie, have we spoken about, in a technical and tactical sense, this Leeds team will be nearly impossible to beat. Psychological, however, is probably where you want to put a lot of your efforts, trying to get under your skin, frustrate, and then capitalise on lapses in concentration or elements such as that.
Good goalkeeping from Tom Kelly. He had to be assured there in coming out and getting that ball.
Dan McClellan trying to do it the hard way. Not necessarily good on the eye, but it can be incredibly effective as he wins his side corner ball, I think, anyway.
No, I think it's been given the other way.
So it does go in the favour of Leeds. So you're seeing Aspire adopt this fairly high press, trying to swarm and surround those yellow shirts. Lewis Harris does well to break away, only as far as John Bolden, into John Dixon, who has an attempt at goal. It doesn't really have any power to trouble Ethan Fisher, but it's a sight on goal nonetheless. A little bit of contact between John Bolden and Dylan Kelsall. It's probably John Bolden on the follow-through. It was very even coming together from the two of them. So a set ball. Fairly uniquely is the decision. It could have gone either way, so I'm not...
Yeah, it's one of those where you can sort of let the game play, but I guess the ref wanted to have a word,
No,
so that's why
I don't mind that at all.
No, it's a perfectly
From Paul
reasonable way.
Yates.
Big games like this with a lot of big personalities on the court as well, it's good to manage them consistently. Just having little words with players here and there, that's the best way to do it.
Diagonal splitting ball was inviting Dan McClellan to attack it with his front bumper. Somehow we've already observed 10 minutes in this fixture. It's absolutely flown by, and on reflection you'd probably say Aspire the better of the two sides, or certainly the more attacking of the two sides, but nothing to separate them as of yet.
Yeah, you've not seen Leeds really pin back like this ever. Even when they played Teesside, it was very end-to-end.
Kelsall Attempts an effort blocked by Dan McClellan. John Dixon attacking it, and he squeezed it through. Paul Yates has come over to Steve Crum. No goal given. Just trying to understand the decision of the referee. He's talking to Dan McClellan, who's involved in the build-up.
Yeah, I don't know why he's talking to Dan McClellan. It was John Dixon who pushed the ball through. The only thing I would say is, I need to see it back. Did the ball cross the line before the contact occurred? Because if it did, then maybe should have been allowed. But there was definitely a heavy collision in there between the pairing. I mean, it wouldn't have been the first time you'd seen a goal scored like that in a game between the big sides in this division. Obviously, John Dixon scored basically, well, not a carbon copy, but a very similar goal against Teesside.
Yeah, there is strong appeals from Bobby Williams in front of us. I think it was deemed too aggressive. But then this game will be separated by the finest of margins. John Bolden with the free kick into John Dixon. And that's an uncharacteristic error from Dylan Kelso. It rolls out of play. Will we see that become a really significant factor come the end, as John Dixon's just turning into Dylan Kelso there? Has to be more aware of his surroundings, but equally it's good positioning from Dylan Kelso. He put himself in the firing line to win his side the free kick. So Ethan Fisher to take into Dylan Kelso, pickpocketed by Dan McClellan, flicks it centrally. Didn't have the power to meet John Bolden, and you wonder if that will play psychologically in their minds. I don't know, it just feels like their heads have dropped ever so slightly, Aspire. Maybe the frustration from that disallowed goal.
Yeah, the game's changed slightly since that goal was.
You can feel it, can't you?
Yeah, it just feels edgy now.
But I think that is playing into Leeds' hands, who are looking to impose themselves a little bit more. It goes down to Dan Rigby, takes it with him. Tom Kelly just tries to shield it. It looked like there was a gap there. Dan Rigby thought there was a gap there. But it goes out for a goal kick. John Bolden wasn't hugging that post, so
no.
Had Dan Rigby been more accurate with his attempt, could have caused them a tremendous amount of difficulty. I think what we can feel is the nerves now. The magnitude of this fixture. As it goes out to John Dixon, just swipes it down. Maybe could have got a little bit more angle on that ball, just to put it out for a sideline ball rather than a goal kick.
Although we just saw the difficulty that Aspire just had playing out from a goal kick. Will Leeds have the same problem? Because you've got Ethan Fisher in goal, who's a very assured distributor.
Into Dan Rigby. Lewis Harris now invites John Bolden forward.
It's an Aspire ball when it goes.
Strong appeals. Yep. Ian Harley has corrected his decision. Hand up in apology. So
that would have been, you heard the what from all around the court. That would have been a nightmare if he hadn't corrected that.
Bolden into Dixon, intercepted by Dylan Kelso. Again, metal on metal, but waved on by Paul Yates. Can't quite accept that one, so Dan McClellan will get a second telling off. No card. I think Paul Yates has overseen this and policed this very well.
Very well. I think the disallowed goal is going to be debated for hours probably after this game. But
yeah, but he has Steve Crump on his left, who is, in our opinion, the best referee in the world. And they are afforded a much better angle than we are. So maybe they have a different perspective. But the game is still there to be seized. Ethan Fisher has played more of a muted role compared to other games. That was so close to contact between the two. They're very similar players, John Bolden and Ethan Fisher. The way they play, the way they will never give anything up.
Yeah, I think Ethan Fisher is almost the protege. The next one.
Ricochet falls kindly to Dan Rigby. Just attacks the box.
So physical every time.
It is, and Paul Yates is facilitating this. He could easily stop and start this every 5 or 10 seconds with the bits of contact and the aggression, but I think the players are relishing the opportunity, just being allowed to play as if it was like a competitive training session.
Yeah, let's hope this fixture is never played in the Champions League.
Yeah, if we reference what we experienced in Paris for the Club World Cup,
I
think it would be 2v2 currently. We would have seen cards, we would have seen stoppages, but that is the beauty of the English game. Over 100 people tuning in for this one. A huge thank you to everyone. Hope you're enjoying it as much as Charlie and I are. We've got 2 minutes left of this first half. And there's contact between Rigby and McClellan off the ball. Everyone's just getting on with it. There's no appeals. There's no complaints. They know the nature of the beast. Again, strong play from Lewis Harris. There's a slight clash of shirts there with Tom Kelly and Lewis Harris, who's appealing strongly. And it's the correct decision from Paul Yates. Lewis Harris is driving into a gap that just simply isn't there.
You can't do that.
But again, you have to commend the bravery to put yourself in your chair in those sort of situations where contact is inevitable. It's John Bolden can't break past Dylan Kelsall. The secondary effort swiped goal-bound via John Dixon. It wouldn't have necessarily troubled Ethan Fisher. But again, I'd probably challenge John Dixon to just try and get them, almost like rugby, getting them out on the sidelines that you can then condense far more effectively than you can from goal kicks.
Some teams really struggle to play out from goal kicks. For example, Teesside, goal kicks are one of their biggest weak points.
Yeah.
Because they don't take them, they don't have the goalkeeper taking them. Whereas
it's not Leeds' weakness.
It's not Leeds' weakness because they've got such a confident distributor in goal and they really trust him and put 3 players in unique positions.
Surely the last passage of play for this first half, despite the physicality. There hasn't been a great deal of stoppages. It was stop-start to begin with a few 2-on-1 infringements, but for the most part, it's been allowed to flow, as this has been the key battle of the game. Kelsall and Bolden, as Bolden just completely cuts Dan Rigby out the process there, feints to engage it, just pushing it off of Lewis Harris. I think it's very much intentional from the Aspire captain. And that signals the end of the first half. A moment for the players to breathe, a moment for us to breathe. And as of 20 minutes in, your prediction, Charlie, may be coming through. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in. We'll be back very shortly for the second half. Hello everyone and welcome back to Aspire versus Leeds in game week 3 of the 2025-26 Slater Gordon Premiership, where you're joining myself, Ryan Sipple, alongside Charlie McClellan. We've been having plenty of debates at half time. I think the best place to bring you into this is showing you the live league standings. You can see that a potential point apiece put Leeds on 32 and Aspire on 31. We're talking about it potentially opening the door to Teesside, who have 2 games in hand. Win them both, they will go on to 34 and leapfrog both. So a lot of football, a lot of significant football left to be played. And we was just having the conversation with Greenbank's Marcus Harrison and how he is massively regretting not going for it earlier in the season, and he's ruining on potentially dropped points to the likes of West Bromwich Albion and Throttles as damaging or denting their title aspirations, because if they had won that at the conclusion, the very end of game week 2, they would be on 32 points and very much in this mix. So it is fascinating stuff, but one thing is for certain: if you're John Boldin, if you're Dan Rigby, Dylan Kelsall, whoever, the objective is clear. You have to go for this in the second half, and you need to come away with 3 points.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were expecting it to be sort of gung-ho and sort of just incredible, like champagne football in that first half. I did not think it would be that at all. I thought it would be cagey, and it has been, hasn't it? It's been so nervy at times. Leeds looked a shell of themselves in that first sort of 10 minutes, just completely out of sort of creativity. And then Aspire had that blow, and since that point, when they had the goal disallowed, they've looked nervous. It just has been a game that, we said this in game week 1, the Aspire Teesside game, even then, felt like a game week 5 title deciding match.
Absolutely.
And this feels the exact same. It has that tension that you could just cut with a knife.
Yeah, and we was just referencing some of the fixtures left to be contested in game weeks 4 and 5. If we take Leeds as an example, in game weeks 5 they play Aspire and Teesside. If you're referencing Teesside, my God, do they have a tough run to the title. Game week 4 incredibly favourable in comparison, but in game week 5 they play Aspire, West Brom, Newcastle United Foundation, Greenbank and Leeds in consecutive games. And we have Mr. Greg Baxter in front of us shaking his head. So if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it the hard way. But I think we're going to see false tables until the real latter stages, maybe even the last day, where we're going to see swings and shifts constantly. And then if we're looking at Aspire, game week 5 has Teesside, Leeds and Greenbank for them. So it's
so hard. It's so hard to predict. You cannot find, you can't predict it. It's absolutely crazy. There is going to be so much drama between now and the end of the season. You know, Greenbank after the Throttles game would say, "Oh, we're out of it. That's it. We're done."
Yep.
But now they're saying, "Oh, well, if we just win this game and we win this game and we play against this team then," and they're all of a sudden thinking about it again. And it's going to be like that right down to the death. Nothing is ever decided in a league in game week 3, but especially this season, because, well, we've seen that teams all have the capabilities to take points off each other. And there's so many games that have been nearly moments, you know. Villa nearly taking points off Teesside earlier in game week 1. We've had so many moments that could have been pivotal in the title race that have been not quite there. I don't know why Marcus Harrison's shaking his Greenbank shirt in front of me, but it's the finest of margins. It's
absolutely fascinating. And another fixture that could be season defining is the one up next, Encore A. West Bromwich Albion take on Teesside. Of course, West Bromwich Albion coming off the back of that 1-0 defeat to Greenbank, but a lot of context that are weaved into that defeat. Chris Gordon had a very late opportunity to level the tie, but Teesside, relatively speaking, and please focus on that word, haven't necessarily hit the heights we've come to expect. I know it was a 9-0 win over Muscle Warriors, but they are rooted to the bottom of the standings. I think this is when Teesside can really put down that statement, ending game week 3 with a comprehensive performance against the 5-time champions. And then later today, Newcastle United Foundation against Greenbank. Again, equally as significant for them if Greenbank are going to be in the conversation going forward. But the squads are back out in position. Paul Yates is in the centre, as is Lewis Harris. And no surprises, Charlie. The team's completely unchanged from that ended the first half. We're back underway.
Yeah, Leeds and Aspire, there's a couple of squads in the league where you sort of don't know what their strongest four is, but Leeds and Aspire, they have that set four that they go to for every game, every big game, and that's very unlikely going to change at any point this season. So these are the 8 players that you'd expect to see out the end of this game.
Absolutely. Dan Rigby peppering some efforts into the side of John Baldwin. Nothing that troubles him a great deal, but you can see Leeds trying to start this half on the front foot. Dan McClellan all the way through to Ethan Fisher, just cushions it into the side of Lewis Harris, which invites the press of John Baldwin. Pick off to John Dixon, who tries to get his front bumper in front of Ethan Fisher, unable to do so. But Aspires have an opportunity to attack now. They get some angle, goes through to Tom Kelly once again, tested. Nice dummy from John Baldwin, sets away Dan McClellan, who is closely marked by Lewis Harris. The whistle is in the mouth of Paul Yates. Play does continue. Again, fantastic officiating. Dan McClellan does do well to escape some sort of punishment or a word from Paul Yates, but it's the reason this game has been so good is because he's facilitated it continuing, not that stop-start nature that we have seen in games gone by.
Indeed, I completely agree.
Oh, that was very close to setting Dan McClellan away. And you can see that trigger of John Dixon. He was ready to advance up the court to match the advancement of his alternate winger. Dan McClellan just blocked off by Dylan Kelsall. John Dixon presenting as an option in the centre, who Dan McClellan finds a lot of pace. Gifts Leeds possession.
Yeah, I like the ball from John Dixon. That's very good.
The success we're seeing is when those wide players, whether it's Aspire or Leeds, are getting brave with those pick-offs at the last second, getting your chair in front and recycling play, typically between winger and central player, as he tries to squeeze the ball in the gap that just simply isn't there, but they won't mind resetting play at this kick-in. Into John Baldwin, switch of play out by Ethan Fisher.
First stages of this half look very similar to the opening stages of the last one.
Dixon into Baldwin, 180. There was almost a gap that presented itself there. The ball had some spin on it, so could have easily gone over the line, as John Dixon, as he has done on a few occasions, doesn't mind a really strong dribbling goal. I think that was how he scored against Teesside.
Correct, yeah, he can be very robust when he wants to, John Dixon.
Lovely interception from Dan McClellan, but doesn't quite have the angle to favour John Dixon, who is having a fantastic season.
Yeah, this is one of the perks of having played in a team like Throssell's, is he is battle-hardened, John Dixon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with Dylan Kelsall, who played at St George's Knights. Dan Rigby, who was obviously the man for Leeds before these players came in. All of these players have had experience in massive, physically challenging games.
Yeah, perfect point, that, Charlie. And it's why there's not a great deal of appeals. They love getting stuck in, all of these players.
Yeah, most of the appeals have come from the sidelines or up above us.
Absolutely, they have. Good chance here for Aspire. John Dixon into John Baldwin. And John Baldwin, I think he's just complaining about Lewis Harris's placement. I don't think he believed he observed 5 metres and almost jumped the gun on that set piece being taken. So no doubt that will be something that Paul Yates closely observes now. Is there a gap through to Dan McClellan? He's just looking to play it off and then attack it on this dribble, force the ball through. Hear the rattling of the chairs as Lewis Harris and Ethan Fisher collide with one another. John Dixon once again with responsibility. Into his captain, returns the favour. Dan Rigby just trying to disrupt those passing lanes. Spire very much on the front foot. We haven't seen many Leeds attacks, if any, in this second half. And that will result in Paul Yates blowing his whistle. Dan Rigby just swiping into the side of John Balding. Goes in the favour. Yeah, Paul Yates was initially signalling towards Tom Kelly in the Aspire goal, but the correct decision and a direct free kick. John Balding glancing over at Dan McClellan, keeping an eye on that front bumper, which he opts to use. Again, as we saw earlier, Dan McClellan, when he's locked in this bottom left-hand corner, certainly, you can tell he's always scanning for John Balding behind him, on his shoulder, ready to receive the flick back.
Yeah, and I think that makes teams so nervous that sometimes he's not even trying to do it. He's trying to win the set piece, and they just, as long as that ball doesn't get back to his number 8, they don't care.
It's a rare miss hit from Dan McClellan, which sees it locked between the chairs of John Dixon and Dylan Kelsall. Dylan Kelsall adorning the captain's armband. At the conclusion of Game Week 3, get your votes in for your Swizzle Standout Player, Unsung Hero, Team and Fantasy Team of the weekend. Many of these players on this court will be in contention. Information will be posted on social media, WFA's pages, as Dan McClellan into John Dixon. Very congested. That's a really nice ball, and it's attacked by John Dixon, but Ethan Fisher across, and the secondary effort from Dan McClellan also saved by the Leeds number 10. That's probably the best chance Spy have had, certainly in the second half, if not all game.
Yeah, that's the best they've moved. Either side has moved the ball in and around the box. Have to say, Aspire have been the dominant team in this game by quite a significant margin.
They will certainly be the more disappointed of the two if this does end in a stalemate as a result of these attacking chances. But as are 27 minutes and 40 seconds in, Leeds are resolute. John Dixon almost has exclusive responsibility of the set pieces in this second half, pushes it into the box, guided out by Ethan Fisher. Just pushing it off the back wheel. Such a good battle. And the first time we've seen an appeal from John Balding all game, and probably for the best, because Ethan Fisher a little bit too aggressive there. We like aggression, we promote aggression, but there is a line.
Yeah, I love the battle between these two. Ever since sort of the Aspire Newcastle back and forth in the day, it's been so good. Those two are two of the strongest players I've ever seen on a court.
Nice pass out to Dan Rigby. He's been largely nullified in this second 180. Not hit so cleanly, but there wasn't necessarily an option. So I think John Dixon slightly delayed to see if Dan McClellan can make up the space in this alternate channel.
A good decision, I think, to win the set piece.
A little bit of contact between Dan McClellan and Dylan Kelsall off the ball. I did say, after watching Leeds Middlesbrough earlier today, how good Dylan Kelsall was, how he almost single-handedly could dictate the outcome of this game. He has been completely cut out, whether it's a game plan of Aspire or not. He hasn't been able to impart his impressive influence. Very much a 2-on-1. John Dixon and Dan McClellan probably 2 metres from each other.
That's another reason why Dylan Kelsall hasn't had a lot, because the moment the ball was fired into him, 2 players just converge onto him.
If you're Aspire or any Leeds opponents coming up, you have to take Dylan Kelsall out of the game, and they've done so brilliantly. 30 minutes in, as the ball just falls into the front bumper guard of Ethan Fisher.
Nice bit of humour there from Paul Yates. Just to calm the tension, he shouts "play on" as the ball reaches is in Ethan's bumper. That's what you like to see. Just that's a way to make yourself personable to the players. A little bit of banter.
Do you know what it feels like? It feels like whether it's officials to players, players to players, there is so much respect on this court. And whilst there's fire, there's aggression, there's appeals, you can tell everyone appreciates the level this is being played at. And what a fantastic advert, even at 0-0. We're starting to see those lapses in concentration and 2-on-1 discipline from Leeds mainly. An indirect free kick. John Dixon behind a wall of Leeds players. There's not a chance that that ball will locate him. So they just switch responsibility into John Bolden, who controls it, flicks it over to Dixon. You can see the intent, looking to locate Dan McClellan, driving into the other side of the box. Again, looking for John Bolden, who he finds. Ricochets to Dan Rigby, just makes a little bit of contact with his namesake Dan McClellan.
Dylan Kelsall apologises, no appeals. Just a little nick on the back of the chair, it can happen.
Again, it's just respect.
I'm telling you, I went to the England camp in, I can't remember when it was recently.
A few weeks ago.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, and this was all they were talking. This game was being talked about at pretty much every meal.
Good play from John Bolden, bypasses Dan McClellan into the channel. John Dixon is there, he's going to attack the back post. Ethan Fisher has to advance from one side to the other. I think Ethan Fisher's had a brilliant game, obviously in a defensive sense that is, but there, as said, there was question marks, not question marks necessarily, but because we haven't seen Leeds and their proficiency in defence, it was just the unknown, but yeah, he's been brilliant in this game, as has Lewis Harris.
Yeah, this is the most I've seen them defend all season.
Pushes it into the box. John Bolden couldn't quite get the accuracy or angle on that. Tom Kelly, a spectator in this second half as it falls to John Dixon, flicks it back. Again, no real accuracy on those front bumpers from John Bolden. I know he's putting it into the channel to then be invited with the front bumper of Dan McClellan, but on those 2 occasions it doesn't come off. Switch of play, John Dixon not there.
To be fair, I actually think John Dixon had done the right thing. He'd moved inside for an inside pick-off and Bolden played it wide. I don't think that was what Bolden was intending to do, to be honest. I think he was trying to get it between the Leeds players.
33 minutes played, nothing to separate exactly. 0-0. It's Dan McClellan into the box, blocked by Dan Rigby. I think 3 in the box. Again, that is the second one this game. Steve Crump, eagle-eyed on this left-hand wing. And can they make this count? They didn't in the first half when they had one. Dan McClellan trying to position his chair between Ethan Fisher and Lewis Harris. John Dixon really wide as it's just flicked towards the goal behind Ethan Fisher. That is a fantastic finish from Dan McClellan. He's reversing backwards. He just uses his front bumper to guide it and spin it past Ethan Fisher.
Oh, that is genius.
A sensational goal.
We've
and
just
Aspire have the lead.
That is genius. Absolute genius. Just the little angle on the chair. Watch it back, because I didn't think it was intentional at first, but I think it is, Ryan, because it's just the tiniest little deftest flick.
It is absolutely intentional. We talk about big players announcing themselves in the big games. Dan McClellan has done it so many times, but he continues to be that star boy for Aspire. We saw a similar one like it across Gameweek 3 when Greg Baxter scored in very similar fashion against Muscle Warriors. That was brilliant.
I think it's
but that was world class.
That was absolute world class. I think it's becoming difficult to call him a star boy. He's risen to the challenge like a man.
And we're seeing tempers flare now. Oh, it's going to be Dan McClellan who will be told off. He was just reversing into the side of Lewis Harris. So will probably receive yellow, which is probably to be expected. He's had multiple warnings, and Paul Yates has done everything to give the players the time and the opportunity to express themselves and play with freedom. But there does come a limit, and I don't think there's many appeals from Dan McClellan, who won't care a great deal if he can help Aspire see out this 1-goal lead.
After about 10 minutes, it looked like Dan McClellan was walking the line to a booking then, so I'm surprised he's made it to the 36th before getting booked.
And now we have to see Leeds attack this game if they want to get anything from it. That is huge. Leeds have struggled to get into the Aspire half, let alone create any chances. So they're going to have to do something they've been unable to in the 16.5 minutes we've played in the second. Ethan Fisher into Dan Rigby to Tom Kelly for a very rare touch.
I mean, up to this point, I don't want to jinx anything, but this has been an almost perfect performance from Aspire. Controlled, they haven't let Leeds do what Leeds are good at, which is get pace on the ball. It's been just a tactical brilliant. Leeds just haven't known what to do.
Well, they've managed to carve them open, and Ethan Fisher scores the goal to find the equaliser straight after Dan McClellan opened. There was a few appeals, it almost stopped, and we all in situ just watched that ball roll over the line, and Ethan Fisher gets them back into it.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. I think it's just a ricochet in midfield, but what a response from Leeds. Of course, I've just done the biggest commentator's curse. What a response from Leeds. That's the character that you need to show if you want to be considered in the title race. He's now bursting forward Dylan Kelsall.
Yeah, Leeds did what they haven't been able to do all game, just draw Aspire out of their shape. And this game has just burst into life. And Leeds, in the face of defeat, have the potential now to look for 3 points. Dan Rigby with the free kick up high. Ethan Fisher colliding with John Bolden in the box. Into Ethan Fisher, and a potential break on now. An overload of players. John Dixon advancing down this wing. John Bolden in the centre. He's going to push it all the way into Lewis Harris, or try to certainly. Great defending from the Leeds goal scorer, Ethan Fisher. Play continues despite John Bolden's appeals. He's unaware as to the ball's placement. I don't think the player's stopped, so I'm not quite sure why he's blown his whistle there.
Because John Bolden is going to get...
No, but the play hadn't stopped. John Bolden's concentration completely diminished, and he was so locked in communication with the officials.
I mean, he's got the free kick.
He has, but Paul Yates hadn't blown his whistle, so Leeds were continuing to play.
Completely agree. It was just a messy, 30 seconds there.
Somehow we're in the final minute, and a defence from Aspire now is an attack, and a very good position. You can see that it's primed for the 180 of John Bolden, who's now facing to attack it with his front bumper. It hits the corner of his chair. He'll be lucky to escape a 2-on-1 as Dylan Kelsall looks to break away. An incredible game of football. That looks as if it's going to end with a point apiece, maybe a late chance for Leeds. John Dixon controls. In comes Dan McClellan. I mean, on reflection, you probably say Leeds will be the happier of the two with the point, but upon going down, they took the game to Aspire, they stretched them, and they punished them. So for many, they'll say it's a well-earned point. It's Dan Rigby, tries to put himself in the firing line. You can tell what he's trying to do, and wins his side the free kick. Incredibly brave, because John Boulding was unaware as to his placement. We've now ticked over into additional time. Charlie, player of the match, can you... And the whistle has been blown. That was fiery, that was frantic. Aspire will be disappointed, but...
I feel out of breath.
Yeah.
I mean, that last 10 minutes was absolutely crazy. I think Aspire will be gutted, because up until that last sort of 5-minute period where they lost control completely, they dominated that game and they got the goal to show for it as well. And yeah, I need to see the goal back. It just came, it happened so quickly.
It did, and we kind of stopped because play stopped. But I will say that while Aspire dominated territory and possession, it wasn't necessarily the attacking chances, and Leeds will feel that they executed upon their game plan. If we bring up the live league standings, you can see what a point apiece does. It won't change from what you saw at the half-time break. Leeds at top with 32 points, Aspire on 31. Both played the same amount of games. That does open the door to Teesside to come in, but they won't replace them in game week 3 because they only have one more game left this weekend against West Bromwich Albion in 5th. A moment to breathe. Can we just commend the officiating in that one?
Yeah, brilliant. Paul Yates managed it perfectly. The fact that there was only one booking in that game, there could have been a lot more. It was brilliantly refereed. I feel out of breath after it, so I can't imagine how the players and the officials feel. Incredible football, incredible.
Yeah, huge thank you to everyone that's tuned in. We have just a couple more games in game week 3 of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. Hope you can join us for them.